Thank you very much. It's been said that there are no coincidences. I think that's true. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But if we only look back 100 years, we can look into the Nazi Manifesto of 1920 with 25 points designed to dehumanize and disenfranchise the Jewish people, to make it clear that Jews have no place in Germany only 100 years ago. 1933, the Nuremberg race laws, government-sanctioned laws put in place in order to do more than disenfranchise a people, to instead paint the people as ugly and as unworthy of life. And Kristallnacht, just barely 5 years later, with the destruction of more than 1,200 synagogues and the burning of not just books and not just crystal, but of people. And there was no outcry, and nobody took a look and said, from 1920 with the Nazi Manifesto to 1938, high years, 18 years, is this what we've come to? And it moved right from there into the Shoah. And by the time the Shoah was ending and the attempted annihilation of our people, the pushing of people into gas chambers and into crematoria, and the working of our people to death, these were not coincidences. These were planned conspiracies enforced by one government and other people who either stood by or participated to make sure that happened. And what do we hear today? Hitler should have been allowed to finish the job. This is what our young people today are hearing, and more than hearing it, they are repeating it. They are believing it. In 1944, near the end of the Shoah, the Arab League countries convened, and they adopted a plan for the economic boycott of the Jews. This is near the end of the Shoah, a plan for the economic boycott of the Jews. And the Arab League put that into effect, and countries signed it. And what did they sign? They signed to see to it the Jews were neither allowed in their country, nor could they do business in their country, nor did they have any of the rights of freedom which we all cherish. And those very incidences that I've just described only spanned 24 years until the foundation of the Arab League, from the adoption of the Nazi Manifesto. And from 1944 until the Abraham Accords were signed, only 2 countries of the Arab League signed agreements with Israel: Egypt, Jordan, both arising out of wars. And the Arab League countries that attacked Israel blame it all on Israel, blaming it on the Jew. 2 countries in all those decades signed agreements. And in 2020, at the end of the Trump administration, 4 countries signed agreements, all within a short span of time. That too was not a coincidence. Some will say it was actually a conspiracy of the Jews working in the Trump White House, or working as President Trump's ambassador in first Tel Aviv and then moved to Jerusalem. Over the 100 years, we have been painted as a people that is an apartheid, racist, criminal people. When Phyllis and I went to Nairobi in 1985 to the UN Conference on Women, the theme was Israel, Zionists, racism. 10 years earlier, the United Nations in 1975 adopted a formal resolution equating Zionism with racism. And in Nairobi, we fought to keep those few words out of the outcome document at the United Nations. And fast forward to just before 9/11. We went to Durban under the auspices of B'nai B'rith International, Phyllis and I, and delegations from B'nai B'rith and other Jewish organizations around the world to stand against racism. The conference, the Durban conference, was a conference designed to stand against racism. And the theme of that hate fest was the demonstration of Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people as the worst possible people in the world, and people who were not worthy, are not worthy. And that was only 20 years ago. What we saw in Durban were the seeds of hate that have been sown and that have grown over 20 years, if they only started then, into flowering trees, beautiful trees, trees that people believe. And when Amnesty International wrote just last week what we talked about in the book as we worked on the book over the last few years, and I thank my wife Phyllis and I thank our daughters, both Ariana and Ilana and Stephanie, and their husbands Ben and Joe Typograph, who worked tremendously on the research, my law partners, Noel Noodleman, Tracy Kalick, our assistant, Kiana Fogel, working with Geffen and working with friends who helped give ideas, but also helped make it happen. How did they make it happen? Because together they were willing to stand up and tell the story. Why does the story have to be told of just the last 100 years? Leave out for the moment the last 3,000 years that we all so pridefully talk about, our ancestral rights. Look at 100 years and look at just in the last 2 weeks with Amnesty International doing what the International Court of Justice in 2004 set the stage for. The International Court of Justice, on referral of a request from the General Assembly of the United Nations, reviewed the issue of the legal consequences of Israel's construction of the apartheid wall. We renamed it, those of us who worked on the issue, working with the Israeli embassy, working with Israeli diplomats, working with the State Department, working with think tanks. We renamed it the Terrorism Prevention Security Fence, because that's the only reason that fence was built. And 96% of it approximately is a fence, and only 4 to 6% of it is a concrete wall. And it's all designed to fence out the terrorists. This book was written because of terrorism. This book was written for the families, some of whom are here today. And I would be remiss if I didn't just simply mention in quick form families who came here through their pain tonight in order to be able to stand up proudly and say, we are here and we will not put down our swords of fighting against terror and fighting against anti-Semitism and fighting against demonization, because those families, and to each of you who are here, Todah, to each of you who lost loved ones and the fiber and fabric of your families and your communities, we feel for you, we love you, we work for you, because we do not have a choice in light of the conspiracy, because there are no coincidences. We have been facing a conspiracy pushed by the Arab League, pushed at the United Nations, and now pushed by NGOs over the entire global world. We predicted when the International Court of Justice in 2003 and 4 undertook to examine the legal consequences of the apartheid wall, we predicted that it would be an adverse decision for Israel, and we warned everybody who would listen, do not be silent, because that decision, although an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, will start to be quoted. It'll be cited, if you will. It will be referenced, if you will. And 20 years later, and part of the book deals with a look back to see how over the 20 years, courts in the UK, courts in the United States, courts around the world have quoted the International Court of Justice saying what you all hear every day, if not every week, and that is Israel is in violation of international law. What's one of the worst things any of us could be called? A racist. The conspiracy of painting Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people as racists has been an intentional plan and design over these last decades, because since they didn't beat us on the battlefield, they turned in a multi-pronged way to diplomatic warfare. They turned to a warfare of more than just diplomacy, but a warfare of words. And they use those words in a way that is manipulative. And it embeds in the media, and it embeds on the college campuses, and it embeds in the international relations courses. And those of you who are here from when we started working together in the American Zionist movement, you will remember we were told, drop the word Zionism, nobody wants to hear it. And we said, but Zionism is our right as a people to our freedom in our ancient homeland. Let us proceed with pride. I want to borrow, as I close, from a paraphrasing of Elie Wiesel. Silence is not an option, but our young people are today more than silent. They have been co-opted by the conspiracy. They are believing it. They are buying into it. They want to be part of it. They want to run away from the Israeli flag and the Mogun David on their chains, and they want to take off the kippah. And they're reading about the attacks, and they don't get it, and they presume we must be at fault. And we have been blamed by the world, at the United Nations, in the press, by professors, and sometimes even at home. Today's wonderful commentary by our experts, and thank you to each of you for being here, for planning, for thinking, for sharing. We appreciate it. Was designed not in order for you to hear from me, but designed in order to help you think about the fact that there is a profound linkage between terrorism, anti-Semitism, and the demonization of Israel. And until we, all the Jewish organizations, left, right, and center, all the religious streams, no matter what we believe and whether we wear a kippah or we don't, no matter where or how we pray, no matter what we believe, unless we as a global Jewish community, not just an American Jewish community, as a global Jewish community, including within Israel, work together in order to help our own people understand the danger of the repetition of history. The signs are here. I spoke at the beginning about the Nazi Manifesto. I referenced the boycott. The playbook of the Nazis was adopted by the Arab League. And the playbook of the Arab League has become embedded in the terror organizations and in the terror-sponsoring countries of Iran, of Syria, of others. And the terror organizations like Hamas and PIJ and PFLP and Hezbollah, they believe we are unworthy and we must be, excuse an old expression, be pushed into the sea and annihilated. The fact of the matter is, as was said here, it's those terror organizations and terror-sponsoring states that provide the fuel for terror, provide the fuel for murder, provide the fuel for hate, provide the fuel for anti-Semitism and for demonization. The money that flows around the world to support terror, anti-Semitism, and the demonization of Israel is beyond comprehension. It's billions of dollars, and nobody is really working to stop it, and nobody really cares. And when hundreds of billions of dollars were released and are scheduled, and they're talking about releasing again to Iran, the world's worst sponsor of terror in the world, please understand, as others have said, when someone says they want to kill you, you darn well better listen. And Iran says publicly and with pride, we will destroy not just Zionism. We will destroy not just the Zionists. We will destroy Israel because we, they say, are the pariah, and it is being believed and it is being supported. And I close with this. Silence is not an option, but we must stand strong together in a zero-tolerance policy by seeing to it that every act of anti-Semitism, every act of terror, every act of hatred, every spewing of demonization, and every defamation of the good name of Israel and the Jewish people is responded to. We know how to think. We know how to write. We know how to speak. It is time that we really learn how to act. Thank you all for being here today.